So, welcome to our Nice Cities panel. This is an event within our Horizon 2020 EU-funded project, NICE, and we are channeling this through Urban by Nature, which is our ICLEIS capacity building program. We will start by presenting the agenda for today. So next slide, please, Adri. Our program will have an introduction given by Diane Trevisan from CETIM, which is our coordinator institution of this project, about the project itself. And then we will have the presentation from Dr. Neil Sang from the Swedish Agricultural University, who is behind the software NICER, and he will present the specific features and how to enroll into the user testing program. Then we will have a question and answer session, a break of 10 minutes, and a round of exchanges. We will report back to the plenary from these exchanges. And finally, we will highlight how to enroll and sign up for the exchanges in the next stage. So the next slide. So just as an introduction, today we will learn about the potential of NICER to be used to support you in assessing NBS for your context, mainly for decreasing pollutants in wastewater, among other ecosystem benefits, and how to enroll in a user testing program of this free software. NICER is fully open source, and it's operated with Microsoft Excel with interface with QGIS, and it can help assessing the effectiveness of NBS in multiple scales, from individual buildings to watershed catchments. We want to give the word now to Diane, who will kindly introduce the NICE project. So Diane, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Carmen. So before the presentation of Neil about the NICER software that will have more information about it, before I will introduce our project. So the NICER project started in 2021. We are progressing with a lot of research about nature-based solutions. Basically, our project is about innovative, enhancing nature-based solutions for urban water cycle. Next slide, please. So as I said, we started our project few years ago, and we have a huge consortium with partners that are involved in nature-based solutions for water, related to several aspects of water treatment and mitigation of water issues. Next, please. So we are in the third year of the project, and our main objective of the NICER project is basically mitigate and solve some climate change problems and problems related to pollution that recently are increasing in our world. So the key objectives of our project is improve these nature-based solutions for water treatment, widen these solutions to be available to be used in different places and in different conditions, and at the same time share the key knowledge that will obtain during the project, and of course support the stakeholders to replicate these solutions, because these solutions have a lot of co-benefits, and so is a very attractive solutions to be implemented to solve these issues. Next, please. So I will not explain with details about nature-based solutions, but well, we have several kinds of nature-based solutions that can support us in different challenges. As I said, the climate changes, natural disasters, and of course, these solutions are involved in water issues. Next. So, for example, we have green walls, vegetated rooftops, rain gardens, and constructed wetlands that we can use for treat water or to manage water. So, in more specifically, these kind of systems can help us in the process of pollution removal, and improve the water quality and reducing some risks associated with water disasters. Next. So the nice strategy is research these kind of systems, enhance the performance of these systems related to these issues that I said, as pollution removal and and water disasters. And after, with these enhanced solutions, the idea is implement them in urban real labs. For example, is implement these solutions in real conditions with different kind of wastewaters to confirm that that solutions can support in the issues, and can bring some benefits. Next. So, what we are researching in NICE, we are researching green walls, all these systems to treat the several types of waters, and with the key knowledge that we'll obtain with this research, we expect to provide the key knowledge for design and for implementing these solutions in new places, increase the use of these solutions, the investments, and of course it's important to share, to have a cross fertilization between partners and between projects and in communities to share the experiences, that they can knowledge about these nature-based solutions. So in the NICE project, we have a lot of activities, different activities that will support the objective to enhance it and to wide the solutions. Next. So what have we achieved so far in the NICE project? So as I said, we started in 2021, and at the moment we achieve a lot of good results and good feedbacks about the solutions. We had the capacity to improve the performance of the solutions to treat water and to improve the water quality. So, for example, we obtain information about how to improve the removal of emerging contaminants using adsorbent materials. We detected that these systems can have a higher performance to remove COD and ammonium using aeration strategies. We observed that these systems can have a good removal of pathogens using phyto remediation plants. These systems, we saw that they are very resistant to different flow rates and contaminants concentrations. Well, in conclusion, our research part had a good results trying to optimizing these nature-based solutions for water treatment. Next. So, as I said, the idea is to implement these systems in urban real labs. So, for example, we are implementing this solution in a upscale in several places distributed in Europe and behind. And for example, we implemented a system, constructed wetlands in Cairo to treat river water to reduce the salinity and to be used for irrigation. For example, in Ganski, we implemented a rain garden to mitigate the flooding and in the same time improve the storm water quality. Next. And of course, the research is important, but is important also to distribute and to share the information that will obtain in the NICE project. So we have a lot of activities that have this aim, which is spread the information about our solutions and also solutions that we can find in other projects. So, for example, we are preparing a portfolio with several examples of innovative nature-based solutions from European cities and from non-European countries. We are preparing guidelines for the implementation of these systems, and we are quantifying the co-benefits of these systems. Also, we are developing new replicable business models for the systems, and of course, we are developing an open source nature-based solution that Neil will explain better further, that will support to select which nature-based solution is the best for different conditions and how to implement these solutions. Next. So basically, it is the NICE project. Is a very ambitious project, but we expected to achieve a lot of impacts, for example, related to the increase of these solutions in the implementation of these solutions and related to co-benefits that we can obtain from these solutions. And that's it. So thank you, and I will be available for any questions about the project. And now I think we can go to the part of the NICE.
Thanks so much, Diane. We will play now the presentation from Nissan.
So, NICE. This is software that we have developed to put peer-reviewed knowledge about specific tested nature-based solutions directly into the hands of decision makers. It has three components: NBS units, cases, and the overall NBS system. NBS units is our term for any green wall, green roof, rain garden, constructed wetland, etc., for which we have data on how effective it is at removing specific pollutants. So we have a database that lists a range of those examples. Cases are examples of pollution profiles from various domestic and commercial sources in different countries around the world, and we have a list of those also. The NBS system is just how those are connected together in a particular example, a particular scenario. So NICER at the unit level takes a case, applies a nature-based solution to it, and calculates the concentration of each pollutant that would be in the effluent. At the unit level, that's relatively simple. Where it gets complicated is when you have a whole bunch of cases operating together with ranges of uncertainty, and they're going into a network of NBS that also has uncertainty in its performance. Now, NICER has been designed to handle a lot of complexity, but we have built it inside Docker containers, so you only need to open the bit of it you're interested in using, and you can avoid the rest. Today, I'm going to focus on the two graphical user interfaces, NICER Excel and NICER Q. The Excel interface is mainly to handle strategic questions. So before you get to any specifically spatial arrangement, and you want to bring in point sources from domestic or commercial backgrounds. The QGIS interface allows you to add on diffuse sources, runoff from agriculture, roads, and so on, but also to start to do planning in space. Now, the easiest way, I think, to explain NICER, to present it, is by using an example where planning across scales is essential. Now, the example I'm using is Lomma in southern Sweden, and we teach this case study to our students on our GIS course, Advanced Digital Landscape Analysis, every year because it's a very concise example of a wicked problem. Essentially, the town's growing very rapidly. It's a very popular place to live, but it's bounded on one side by rising sea level and on the other three by high agricultural value land, which there's a policy against building on. So the question is, how do you start to accommodate these people? If you want to know more about that, there's a video there you can see from a conference a few years ago. But essentially, from this presentation's point of view, what you need to know is that geodesign is a way of collaboratively creating different land use zoning plans. Okay, so it's a very early strategic process. Now, before we can start to look at the higher level complexity, you need to understand a bit about how NICER itself operates. I'm going to start with the simplest possible example, which is one source of effluent and one NBS. So we're building one house and maybe putting a green wall to treat its effluent. This video will show in detail how we're using NICER. After, I'll explain how we scale this to more complex problems with ease.
So the first thing we notice is that we have a tab at the top and we have a range of tools. These tools are designed to help you build an NBS system. System is the way that you connect together loadings, cases, to nature-based solutions in potentially quite large chains or trees. At the simplest level, this is what the NBS system looks like, the format that NICER needs to read. You have three components. You have a header and footer that never change, case background. You can leave it blank, or you can add one which represents, for example, the current state of the receiving water. Does it already have some level of pre-existing contamination? And then at the bottom, the tank discharge, that's what NICER reads to say, okay, here's the results of of the system. In between, at the simplest, you have a case, which is where the pollution is coming from, and a nature-based solution that's treating it. The case you can pick from a list of pre-existing ones that we've provided, various types of sources from different countries, domestic waste, kitchens, bathrooms, and so on. MBS, the same, we have a list of pre-existing examples. Where are those two coming from? This is context dependent, so it picks whichever table it needs. They're coming from these two tables here, the loadings, cases, and the MBS units. So we look at the loadings first. We can see that we have a range of sources, and we have details of exactly how much of each contaminant was recorded as being the result of that source. Now you can see where that's come from. There's metadata that tells you a little bit about the academic source that's done the measurement and reported it. Sometimes they also tell us a bit about where it was done, or what kind of flow rate was used, what year it was done in, and so on. But as far as NICE is concerned, the interesting bit is these contaminant levels. Now, how they're reported depends on the scientific study. Sometimes that is just an absolute concentration. Sometimes it is a range. So you might have a mean and distribution, for example. And we see the same effect in the MBS studies as well, because some of these are reported, for example, 75% has been removed in terms of COD, 80% of BOD is removed. So they're flat rate removals. But sometimes they've seen a range of performance, so maybe 88% plus or minus 11. In these cases, they are equations that actually respond to different contextual requirements and parameters. So it just depends how the scientific study measured this, what kind of result NICER is trying to read. As the end user, you don't need to know which is which. You just pick whichever MBS solution you want, and then NICER will interpret that for you. But obviously, it's a good idea to understand what this means, and they are all explained in the user manual. Okay, so that's the basic structure. Now, NICE will read that in a zigzag pattern, like lacing shoes across the table. So you start with a case picks up timings, goes into what I'm calling a tank. I should have called it a pipe in hindsight, because it doesn't store the water, it just moves it on. However, we're stuck with the term tank for now. And when we pick a case, so for example, if we pick Lomma, let's see if I can find it. Oh, there it was. Lomma, like that. It then gives us some options because it's checked to see what type of data this is representing. Is it a flat rate? Does it have a range, and so on? If it has some uncertainty in there, it's saying, what do you want me to do with that? Do you want the worst case, the average, the best, or just to pick a value from within the observed range that the study saw? So if we pick the worst case, it then appends, it gives you a suggested name, and it appends the word worse onto the end. So if you're doing this without the tools, you can just type that in. Yeah? But the tool helps you through the process. Let's take a look at what this might look like for the example of the house in Lomma. So we have the case from Lomma, which is a domestic case, and it's going through these timings. So it's happening in the first hour and the second hour. And then we want to see the worst case. We want to see the maximum loading that it could potentially face. It picks that up, it goes back across, and says, okay, what are we going to do with this tank of worst case effluent? We're going to put it into our nature-based solution. We've picked our nature-based solution, which is Lomma Greenwall 1, and that is going across to give some output. Now, this green wall also has a range of performances, and we want to see the worst case. So what's the maximum, most polluted water that could come out of this if we have the heaviest loading and the poor performance from the green wall? That's what this is telling us. It's also possible, of course, that there could be too much water, in which case it overflows. Now, in this case, we're just saying, okay, we'll put that back into the discharge. So we'll get the blended result of the two. You could direct that overflow onto another branch where it gets treated by a new MBS. So those are the two basic components of the case. And then we've just got the discharge and the reporting. The only thing that remains to do is to press play. Now, when we do that, it's asking us how many times we want to run this system. The reason being, of course, that if we were to put in some random elements, say just picking from the distribution, every time you run it, you'll get a different result. You can kind of do some basic Monte Carlo studies with this as well, but we're not doing that now. We're just going to go for a fixed scenario. We'll just do it once. Now that is getting uploaded to the table. If the table is already there in the database, then it will just check with you that you don't want to overwrite it. I do want to overwrite it, and then it's confirming that. It has now sent that to NICER for processing. It's a small system. We very quickly get the result back, run complete on Lumber HSE. Now, it's going to offer to directly throw this back into the workbook that we're using now. But before I do that, I want to show you where it's actually going. So in the folder that you get when setting up NICER, there's one called results, which is blank when you receive it, but it now contains NICER output. If we open that, we can see the results of our study, and we see for each of the contaminants that had a value, we have the results coming out. One last thing to show you before I stop for this video is just to pull that result. So I've got the case here. This is the system that we're dealing with. I'm going to pull the result for it back into this workbook. And the reason I'm doing that is I want to show you this tool here, which is just a way to give you a very quick sense of whether or not we have sufficiently treated the water to meet regulatory standards. Now, there are many different regulatory standards, so it depends which one we pick. If we pick Spain, for example, well, we're doing pretty well on these, we're doing okay on these, we're not doing well on this. And if we pick the EU standards, then we see that we're actually not doing well on this either. So it depends on whose standards you're using. Now, if your jurisdiction isn't there, you can simply add it into this table here. So the whole thing is designed to be flexible.
So just to branch off from the last point there about flexibility, it's not only the different type of regulatory requirements that you can add in for yourselves, you can also add your own case data and MBS data if you have it through this Excel interface. However, the reason we have so many available is because we want to give you the ability to investigate future scenarios for which you don't necessarily have the specific information. You may not necessarily know the mix of domestic and commercial properties, for example, or the way in which they're going to be arranged. So from this initial unit of one property with one MBS, how do we scale that? Well, we can take that initial unit and consider it like a building block. We can then multiply that out to represent a whole street. But these are not identical Lego bricks. They are smart bricks, because by changing the requested output name from worst case to rand, NICER will now pick up a different loading profile for every house. That's not a totally random value. It's a value selected at random from within the observed range. Instead of each house having their own green wall, we could try making a larger one at the end of the terrace. That has some advantages. It would be more consistent. So if people are away on holiday, there's other people there who are still able to provide the water that is keeping the system going. So you have the minimum base load, for example. It may also be more efficient for maintenance. And we could test whether or not, say, something 6 times as large is sufficient to deal with 8 times as many properties. The reason being that one might anticipate that they will not all deliver the water at the same time. So we can not only randomize the profile of the different contaminants, but also the timing of their arrival. Now, if I'm wrong about that, you would result in overflow. So we still need to handle the overflow. When we look at the results, we see the discharge is now varying over time. So the different contaminants are varying over time. But although we have some randomness in there, with respect to the regulated requirements, maybe the result isn't actually changing that significantly. On the other hand, we're still just dealing with land use zones. So what if we zone this, instead of being a street, we could zone it as mixed use? So we rearrange the domestic units into apartments, but we can also add a restaurant onto the ground floor. And I'm still concerned about the overflow, particularly with a restaurant included. So let's add a rain garden. Now we see, if we do this, that the system is gradually evolving on the spreadsheet, but it's actually still not that complex. It's only 19 rows. And from the result, we can see that the contaminant increases significantly when the restaurant opens, as you'd expect. But in this particular case, chemical oxygen demand, it's still dealing fairly well with that. Not sufficiently well for the Spanish regulatory standards. Now, it's important to realize that NICER should not be used naively. We've added in a restaurant and a rain garden. Restaurants are going to produce a lot of grease in their effluent, and so far we haven't talked about degreasing. NICER is not there to replace design expertise. It's to help with strategic decisions at this early stage when we're considering different options, both for land use itself and for maybe how we might want to treat the resulting effluent from that. So don't be fooled by the photos of real places. This is not actually a restaurant. They're just examples of how different zones could look, and NICER can help you get some handle on what combinations of MBS could work. So maybe we have one large solution treating the effluent from these different zones, or maybe we distribute that over smaller solutions, for example. Maybe we choose a different zoning because we think that we can treat that different zoning more effectively with a different set of MBS. It's that high level complexity that we're trying to deal with here. Now, at some point, we might need to take into account geographical context. So, for example, runoff, the street versus the mixed-use development has different land covers, different amount of roads, different runoff. When we're trying to take this into account, or we want to actually work spatially in a particular location, that's when we move from Excel to the QGIS interface. I haven't time to show you this in video format, but I have embedded one into this presentation if you want to view that later. We are not assuming any GIS skills. Instead, we have built a set of tools that guide you through the necessary steps. And I should say that actually a lot of these steps are only needed if you don't already have data. If you have your own pipe data, your own network data, maybe you've generated that with a hydrological model, you can work from that starting point. But we're starting from the assumption that you don't have that. The only input it really needs is a bounding box to determine the area of interest and an outlet point that shows you where the discharge would happen. The DEM, we do explain where you can get that from open sources. We're using a 30-meter source of Swedish terrain model. And then crucially, the Strahler order, that defines how dense a network of streams you're interested in. Now, I'm using a 30-meter resolution and a Strahler order of 5 because I want to show you the range of scales we can work at. So we're going to zoom out from Lomma to the entire catchment of the Heyor River. When we run that tool, this is what we get. You can see the catchment here. That's Lomma in the corner there. So it's a very, very big catchment. And you can see the major tributaries for that area. We then have another tool that converts this into a computable network. So we can start to aggregate pollution along the network from source to discharge point. With the result being that we don't just have the streams where we have these points that sit at nodes in that network. And these are the intervening points where you can say, okay, this node, that's going to be a case. It could be a case drawing from the surrounding land cover. Could be a point source case like a factory or a house. Or you could choose where you're going to put in nature-based solutions to say, this is where I want a rain garden. This is where I want a constructed wetland, and so on. Okay, so let's zoom into this area a little bit. So we have Lund, which is just upstream from Lomma. Here we have the main water treatment facility, and downstream we have this tributary here, which is taking water from an urban area across an agricultural area and into a wetland, which is actually an important wildlife area as well. So this would be a good opportunity to intervene with something more constructed to deal with the kind of contaminants it might face. So we can select this point and we get a pop-up form with the same fields we saw in Excel and the same information available as drop-down lists. So in this case, we'll pick a constructed wetland. You can put in the timings. You can put in what to do with the overflow if that happens. And we can do this multiple times across the catchment, putting in different interventions in different places. When we do that, we see the labels pop up, so we know where we've done this. If I had used a higher Strahler order, we would see many more tributaries and many more points where we could make an intervention. So we're picking the scale at which we want to operate by that Strahler order, by how small a stream we're going to be interested in. The final result is that the attribute table of our points is the same as the Excel table. Now we wouldn't run this from QGIS. We would take this into Excel, check we've got everything in order, and then run it as we saw previously. Speaking of scale, one of the advantages of this is we could look spatially at a larger scale and then take one of those points and say that can be our background case for a finer scale. So when we get down to Lomma, what does the water look like that's entering that system, given the interventions we've made upstream in the catchment? And then you would run the Lomma model separately. So that's our two user interfaces. In addition to that, we also supply the RStudio container, which has a full setup of RStudio with all the code as I used it. That's my actual development environment. So you can see that the code's ready to view, edit, and run. And this is where you would go if you wanted to do more data science type applications as well. On the other side, we have the API, which connects my user interfaces to R, but also could then connect any other user interface via the same process. So if you're working in another software, it wouldn't be a great deal of work to connect some other piece of software, maybe a hydrological modeling software, for example, to NICER. Then we have Opla. So the database itself is supplied locally when you get the software, but the intention is to have it hosted on Opla, which means it can become a growing resource that's kept current for the long term and is independent of this software. That means that we can build not just a piece of software, but a living information system. As the science on MBS develops, new MBS units can be added to that directly by the scientists themselves. Plumber can then feed that through NICER and back out to whichever software you're interested in using at your organization. So that is an overview of where we are up to now. It's still in development. It does need to be tested in as many circumstances as we can find, different cities, regions, and so on. If you're interested in being part of that or just to learn more, then do get in touch. And just to give some credit to my colleagues, so Abdul Ghani has been the main developer on the QGIS side, and our finance officer, Kristin Nielsen, has been keeping us on the straight and narrow financially. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Neil. Now we will jump into Q&A. So anybody who has an immediate question that we want to address to Neil or also to Diane in terms of what NICE is working on, please go ahead.
I believe we had some questions in the chat. There was, how can a country from the Mediterranean region have access to the tools that we just discussed?
Yeah, thank you, Adri. Can you maybe address this question? How can a country from the Mediterranean region have access to those tools?
So, well, in the first instance, you can sign up to the beta testing program, and then we'll actually, if you're part of that, then we'll actually help with the setup and so on. Once it's released in just over a year from now, we expect, it will be free and available to download directly along with examples and the user manual.
Thank you, Neil. There is also another question in the chat that if the user manual will be available for downloading.
It will be available when the software is, yes, and there is a version available now, but it's evolving as the software completes. So I think it's probably better to wait until the final release.
Mm-hmm. Is there anybody else has any question? Raise the hand or directly drop the question in the chat. In any case, we have prepared a breakout session. So now we will go through several questions and we will be holding some exchanges with all of you. So if nobody else is, wait, there is one more question here. There is somebody who would like to join the beta testing program. This is great, Chiara.
Excellent. There'll be a sign-up option later.
Happy to hear that. Neil Bancroft is saying that this is a high-level tool for decision-making. Is there a way of adding cost-benefit analysis information to this need?
Right. So at the moment, the tool, I have actually coded a very basic co-benefit option, which basically allows you to calculate something as a ratio of how much of each pollutant is removed. At the moment, I've just commented that out of the software because I haven't found enough scientific evidence to back up those kind of precise calculations. So in terms of co-benefits, it's more a case of whether or not we can find sufficient evidence to back up those kind of calculations, I would say. And then in terms of financials, that's the same issue actually, is do we have, for each of these MBS that I listed in those two tables, the question is, do we have sufficient financial data on that? And in most cases, the published information is mostly about the performance rather than the costs. But the project as a whole, and Dan might want to come in on this, the project as a whole does have a separate work package, which is looking at the overall lifetime cost benefits of MBS in general, but not so much on the specific examples that this model is giving access to. Would you agree with that, Diane? Just check.
Thank you, Neil, for this accurate answer. I think we have time for one more question from Clement Kojo. Are there data on nature-based solutions in West Africa on the software?
No, not yet. I've basically scoured the literature for examples, and I think I have something approaching 70 examples in there at the moment. If I recall correctly, none were specifically from any particular part of Africa. However, and they were mostly European, I have to say. However, the whole point of this approach is that this can be a growing database. Okay, so once we host it on Opera, it will be able to grow as examples come in. And then it's actually up to the MBS community to grow that facility. Yeah.
Thank you, Neil. What Neil Bancroft told you from your earlier question, your earlier answer, that it sounds very sensible. And now Chiara Catalan is asking that she would like to know more about the data source. Is all from scientific literature or from NICER project study cases? Further, is OPLA also a source of data, monitoring data, or how is the interaction between OPLA and the NICER software?
Right. So at the moment, we have some examples from the NICE project. So it's experimental that's been implemented within the NICE project. We have some examples from that. The rest is from peer-reviewed literature. And at the moment, so Opla isn't a source, but they have kindly agreed to host this data. So at the moment, I'm still working on making sure that we can interact with that. There are some potential legal issues into the future in terms of how that would be governed, and some security issues around internet access, new European law on that, for example. So those kind of issues still need to be worked out in terms of how Opla can support this in the long term. But fundamentally, that's the objective that we're working towards.
Yeah, okay, perfect. That's clear. So now we will have a break. This break is going to be a little shorter than supposed. We're back at 3. So please be here for the discussion, because there you can directly address your questions to Neil and our NICE experts who will be supporting the moderation. Thanks everybody, and see you at 3 o'clock.
Adriana, can I just check you can hear my voice?
Hi, Neil. I can hear you fine. Unfortunately, it seems we're experiencing a weird Teams glitch. So I think we're going to conduct the next session in plenary, if that's okay.
Okay.
But I can hear you loud and clear. I'm really sorry about this. I tried to fix it for the last hour, but the rooms aren't opening. So
All right, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Ariana. Ariana, can you hear me? Ariana, can you hear me?
yes, sorry, I was closing another window to unmute
okay.
myself. I can hear you great, Carlos. Thanks so much.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm here.
Perfect. Yes, so as said, we're going to do the next exercise all together. So I think what I'll do in that case is I will again start sharing the screen and we'll facilitate all the questions among the experts we have with us today. So thanks so much for coming back from the break. Now we're going to have a little bit of brainstorming time together. So let me get this set up quickly for everyone. Okay, so as you guys may have heard as we were coming back from the session, Teams does not always work. It is not always our friend. So we are going to talk all together now about a few questions we had prepared to engage everyone on what we just learned. So we have our first question here. At what stage of the design process of NICER is it more useful? So yeah, what stage is this more useful to have NICER, from strategic planning or at a more detailed stage?
I mean, the use case that we've envisaged is more at the strategic level, because I think when you get to making detailed decisions about which MBS to use, you're going to be in touch with a consultant and using their design skills. But exactly where one draws off from the other is maybe an open question. We need to see how it plays out, how people choose to use it. Yeah, but by and large, we're thinking strategic. And that doesn't necessarily imply a particular scale. So I showed their catchment scale one just to show how it would work. But what really determines how complicated it is to model is how many things you have involved. So if you have a single building with lots of different components, different users, that could also be complicated. And if you have a large catchment, but you're only putting in 2 or 3 MBS, that's actually a relatively simple system to model in terms of the connectivity. So it's maybe not that straightforward a question one way or the other, but fundamentally it's to try and answer strategic type problems when you're trying to figure out, can MBS deal with this issue, and maybe what kinds and what quantities and what arrangements are better.
All right, thanks, Neil. That clears a lot of stuff up, but do any other NICE experts have a conflicting opinion? Any audience members have any questions triggered by this thought Neil just had? All right, it seems like a straightforward one. Perhaps we move on to the next question, which is how much technical knowledge do you require to engage in this user testing program? So do you need to be able to understand NBS, having these basic skills like QGIS? Maybe we can go a bit more in depth.
Okay, well, I mean, I can speak to the technical skills. So what you saw there is basically what you need. You need to be able to pick solutions from drop-down lists, either in Excel or in QGIS. That is the extent of the technical knowledge required. But the other question is understanding which MBS are being selected from, and there it's, you know, we will create some examples to work through where we have situations where we know that the particular MBS of choice could work in that situation. So in terms of the workshops, we can bring that. If you were using it in reality, that's a different question. And I would hand over to our MBS experts to say, you know, when picking one MBS over another, what do they need to think about and who do they need to consult?
This is Carlos Arias from a NICE project. We without a doubt, it's a need. One must have some knowledge, at least some basic knowledge about NBAs. So I think this cannot be separated. Not the programming part, not the Microsoft Excel QGIS, but also the NBAs. There must be some basic knowledge about it.
Yeah, because it's not telling you whether or not the choice you pick is appropriate on a range of other dimensions. It's simply saying, what did the reported data about its performance say, and how does that affect the case that you've chosen? But there's a lot of other factors involved.
Yes, and there's not a single NBS. I mean, there's a whole array. There's a whole offer of different technologies that are suitable, depending on the case, depending on the water quality, depending on the target. So there must be some knowledge about NBS, at least basic ones.
Neil, I'm wondering from your colleague that seems to have the more of the focus on the QGIS, if there's anything we need to keep in mind on that side of the equation.
Spatial data wise, Abdulghani, do you have any input on the spatial data?
No, I think, when designing the QGIS interface, I think I tried to make it as simple as possible. So the skills needed is really basic skills needed to use the QGIS interface. And with the guidelines, then it's just maybe spending half an hour to prepare things. And then after that, you can go with using the QGIS interface to put some nature-based solutions in correct places and produce the tables needed to run NICER.
Perhaps you could explain a little more about the point I've only briefly mentioned, that if you have other data sets, pipe-based networks and so on, you don't necessarily need to go with this DEM-derived data.
Yeah, in fact, if you can start from two different levels. Either you don't have anything, and then you, for strategic planning for new areas, you can start with nothing almost in QGIS, and there is a guideline how to prepare the data needed, the DEMs, from where to download this data, and how to run the different models to prepare the network that can be used to put your nature-based solutions. But in another level, maybe you have your own network in the city, or it's already established as a network, then you can import this network directly to QGIS and work from that level. So it's either you don't have anything and you start from zero, nothing, or you have your own network or lines or pipelines, then you just import that layer to QGIS and start working from that.
And perhaps something I should add in there, because I glossed over it for time reasons, but so this is not really the best place to do modeling of the flow of the water itself. So there's nothing hydrological in here, but it does have two factors built in. So you have the retention time of the NBS itself, which would obviously delay water. And then you have this link time, which is basically how long it takes to get from one step, from one row in the table to the next. So if you had some information about how long it took for the water to flow from the source to where the treatment is, you could include that timing in it. But it's just a fixed time that you enter in. So you would have to derive that from another source first. Yeah.
And with the QGIS interface, it can help you with the length between the different points. Then you can decide, depending on the speed of water in the pipes, how long time it will take from one point to the next.
Yeah, so you can factor that in, but how well you do it depends on whether you're deriving it just as a rule of thumb based on length, or whether it's actually a hydrological source that gives you the time taken given speed and so on.
One more thing that I could maybe mention about the QGIS interface, that I put some optional modules that for the user to help the user decide which NBS solution is better to put in this location and why. So these optional modules can provide some additional data related to the area that can help the user see the problem in a better way and decide which nature-based solution is more useful in this location.
For example, based on runoff from agriculture, things like this. But that would be like a loading. So you would you could use something like Scalgo, or you could use just a basic conversion factor between land cover and the type of pollutant to calculate that. But what he's talking about there, he'll aggregate it along, so you can look up catchment and see, given the land covers, what might we expect the loading to be by the time we get to the point of interest.
Great, thanks to both. That's a lot of really interesting points to consider on that and what the tool is able to do. We might move on to the next question, but if any of these discussions trigger kind of a question from the audience, we can also field those as we go through the activity. So it looks like, well, the last question is more so about the logistics of the user testing. So I guess before we go into that, I just welcome anyone, especially any municipalities we have in the room, if you have any questions about specific applications of the tool or recommendations on how to use it, now is a great time to chime in, either in the chat or just by raising your hand or so.
A lot of information.
Okay, so it seems from that pause that we might be ready to talk a bit more, give some more background into the specifics of the user testing process, which is set to take place in the spring and summer of 2025. So Neil, feel free to go ahead.
Yeah, so what we want to do basically is see how usable this is. And we are looking for examples from cities or regions where you have an issue that you want to test against, and we will take you through that process. There's two ways of looking at this. It could either simply be that we provide an online workshop where you try a scenario that we have set up, and we'll test the usability from that point of view. But if you have a particular scenario and you have some data that you want to put in, we can also look at considering that too. Timing wise, it'll be late spring. We're both teaching in early spring, so it'll be late spring onwards over the summer and into September is when those options, the window is available to do those tests. Yeah, but essentially, if you sign up, basically I will get in touch and just ask a little bit more about the scenario you're interested in looking at, and then we'll figure out the best way to run that.
Okay, so it looks like we're a tiny bit ahead of the schedule, but I might actually surprise and provoke our nice experts here and ask for a candid opinion. Why do you think it's extremely beneficial to use such a tool as Neil's, and why should people be interested to be part of the testing? Fabio, for example, are you here?
Yeah, I do. Yes.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, in your expert opinion, why do you think it's an exciting opportunity for a city to be able to use such a modeling tool like Neil's? What could be beneficial from a municipality point of view?
But mainly because you can picture out alternatives, hopefully in a short time. I mean, and then you can try to how to say, to figure out what are the environmental and the economical and social advantages by the implementation of different solutions for the environmental problems they have to face there at a hydrographic basin scale, which is all times very useful because you can have a spatial planning, and that's a very good first step that the decision makers can take for deciding what to do.
And since Fabio mentioned short time, so this does run really fast. I think
Exactly, yeah.
Most of the time you're going to get an answer back in seconds or in minutes. You're not waiting half an hour, and that's quite deliberate because when you're doing strategic plans, you want to look at a lot of options. You want to scope out that parameter space. So that's what it's trying to explore, rather than spending a great deal of time estimating highly precise results for things which have probably not been built yet. So, yeah.
So let's say when you do this kind of territorial planning, one way to proceed, the way to proceed is to start by technical, economical feasibility studies, which are normally needing days for acquiring the data at the beginning, but then even for processing them. And then instrument like this can simplify a lot this data processing, and you can get evident results in a very short time, so you can picture out much more alternatives than what we are used to do for offering a product to the stakeholders that can still have, let's say, the economic coverage. I mean, we are making an offer for to the municipalities, for instance, for drafting a feasibility study, which is based on the time we are occupying for picturing out all the different alternatives. So if the working time for us is shortened a lot, because by instruments like this, we can draw, I don't know, 100 alternatives in 2 days, then the comparison of the 100 alternatives will obviously provide much more information to the stakeholders. So it's better spent money, let's say.
Thank you, Fabio. Those are really important things to keep in mind. So I for some reason thought the last question was the last one, but it turns out we have some more questions. So for example, I think you might have touched on this already, but what kind of data should you have available in order to be involved in the testing, for example?
Well, the data is optional. I mean, it will also be, so we can bring you an example scenarios for you to work through based on maybe the Lama case, for example. But if you have data or you have a particular problem that you're interested in, the kinds of data that is useful is things like profiles, pollution profiles, where you've tested the runoff from roads or from, or you tested the grey water from a particular housing estate. So you know what the pollution profiles are. That will then help you pick which solutions are treating those particular profiles better, for example. So that kind of data can be useful. If you have that spatially in lots of different places, then we can test the QGIS module on that. And but if you don't, as we just showed, we can work from a terrain model and a bounding box. It's just a question of how closely tailored to the exact spatial situation you're interested in you want to get. But ideally, we would love to have some examples where people have actual pipeline data, for example, so we can test it on that. We haven't done that yet.
In that case, I'm a little bit curious if we still have anyone in the audience from the cities directly. Do you guys have any data in your minds or any cases you would think to use such a software, or would you need some help to think a bit more about how to fit the data into such a tool? For example, I think we might have someone here with us from Izmir. If you don't have anything yet, it's okay, but if you wanted to talk a bit about your interests there, it would be fitting, but if not, we could move on.
We don't need to put anyone on the spot. You're welcome to email me about this
Yeah.
and just say, we've got this data. Is that what you're interested in? And then, we'll talk it through.
No, that's fair. Yeah, we don't need to put anyone on the spot, but it's just that we could if you wanted to. But yeah, so that cleared a lot up what Neil has just described about the data. Although I think that is our last formal questions, so we could open it up to any last minute burning questions about anything we've heard today so far.
Hello, this is Kim Comas from ICRA, Catalan Institute for Water Research, and working in Multisource, which is an MBS sister project of NICE, and we are developing a couple of tools which might be somehow similar, but I think complementary. And we met with Neil Sang at the beginning of the project, but that was, yes, in 2011 or something like that, a long time ago. So I think that it is worthy that we should meet again. I don't know, in the next few weeks or months, because I think we could try to look for synergies between the tools, no? How they can be complement one from each other, like for the case studies, at least. I mean, something that came to me immediately was that we could share the case studies. What you call NBSs for us are case studies, the data. We also have an API, so probably the tools can communicate and maybe think on use cases where they could be combined, no? The use of both tools. So, just a comment more than a question. That would be nice to follow up on this interaction. And I think actually also the Commission, the European Commission would be happy that we collaborate, no, and we do something that maybe.
Definitely. I would just say that so my view of NICER going forward is that what I'd like it to become is something that other software can pick from and can take out of. Yes, I've got these two user interfaces, and they supply two particular needs. One, very early stage, very strategic planning that you want to do very fast, scope lots of areas and so on. And one is the spatial side that we just saw. But at the heart of the system is essentially this growing database of MBS units that are being gathered and created by the scientific community. And what we want is a way to make those specifically available for other models to benefit from. So at the heart of the system is making essentially scientific papers machine readable so that they can be used in other modeling systems. And that would be an obvious way that something like Multisource, which as I understand it has a more broad, ambitious decision support tool of capability, could be picking from those kind of things. So it's, yeah, I think there's a lot of potential complementarity there. Yeah.
And Kim, knowing both the models and how they're running and the work behind, I would say that their integration could be very useful, especially, for instance, you have worked a lot in refining the old SNAP tool for the sizing part, I mean, for sizing the different kind of MBS. And now we have a much more solid results, let's say, and that could be a counter check of whatever is produced by the NEAL tool. And so having a cross check in between the tool, but the tools can be very useful for us practitioners when we want to do this kind of big studies at territorial scale and so on. So yeah. I really feel that the two tools could be strongly integrated one into the other.
Yeah, right. That was another idea that came to me immediately, like the comparing if the tools provide similar results, like comparison between the tools that could be used be useful for the validation and to improve both tools. Yes, I fully agree. So we will be interested in following up this testing as well, Neil.
I mean, one of the limits of NICER is that because it's basically reporting on the scientific studies, it reports very specifically dimensioned MBS, and that's its results. So if you're changing the dimensions, you're going away from that result, and therefore having another way of reparameterizing for a different dimension is obviously beneficial. Yeah.
All right, so the floor is still open for any general questions concerning the tool or anything we just discussed, like cross testing with apps. So yeah, if the discussion is kind of winding down, perhaps Neil, did you need any more floor to kind of discuss the next steps of signing up for the tool? We could proceed in this way.
Sure. So ICLEI, well, when you signed up for this session, you had the option of saying that you could be contacted. If you've already done so, then I will still send an email through that just to get some feedback. But if you didn't, ICLEI have provided a further form where you can follow up on that. So if you've been inspired to try it, then you can use that also. And again, the way this will be tested, it is partly, it depends who comes forward to us and whether or not you have data or not. If you don't, we will have more of a standard examples that you can work through just to try it. And if you do, we'll try and tailor it more to you specifically. But it'll be really helpful for us if you do this, because usability is really at the heart of the whole design. Okay.
Yeah, and as Neil was saying, we have a form for anyone interested to sign up. Logistically, what I would do is when the meeting closes, we'll soon send a recap mail, and in that mail we can insert the form for anyone interested. And as he explained, if you had already expressed interest, we're screening that as well from the registration form. But if you're really, really interested, you can fill out the form again if you so please. Yeah, in this case, if nobody has any burning last-minute thoughts, it seems that we might be able to end the meeting early, actually. But that being said, thanks very much, everyone, for your attendance and your thoughts, your very great questions. This is just a preliminary discussion, essentially. So if you have any more questions for Neil or for the NICE experts you met today, you can continue to be in discussion with us leading up to the rollout of the tool. And we're very happy that you were able to join us today. Yeah. Oh, yes. Hi, Elena. Thank you very much. So then in that case, I think we're ready to slowly say goodbye.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Good. Bye.